Disney, ESPN and several independent film companies. So,
okay,
what's your
thanks.
expertise?
Can everybody hear me? Okay. I know we're in a small hall, but if I sound like, Bet Lynch on steroids or something, just tell me to speak up and I'll do my best. So yeah, my name is Hunter, and I've been working in TV for several years in the corporate commercial side of TV, the business side, which is quite separate to the creative side that a lot more people are familiar with. I've worked for all these guys for the BBC, BBC Worldwide, Discovery Channel, Disney and ESPN. Now, it sounds a bit daft to ask this since I'm here at Durham Uni, but how many people are working towards some sort of degree or higher qualification for the answer? Is that everybody? Yeah? Okay. Well, in that case, you're going to be better qualified than me academically, because I have not got any of that. I do not have a degree. I didn't do A-levels, I did AS levels, which is the first year, but I didn't go any further. And I actually come from quite sort of small, humble beginnings. Come from a little town called Morpeth in Northumberland, which is just about 20 minutes on the train from here. And when I was a teenager, I had no idea what I wanted to do, not even roughly. I did loads of things. I've got a couple there. I worked on the checkouts in Tesco's when I left school. I worked for W. Smith Temping. I worked in Martin's, local newsagents. I did loads of different things. And yeah, by the age of 20, I'd been, worked in call centre staff, all sorts of different things. And I also briefly did, which was definitely the most interesting, though the briefest, door-to-door selling. Yep, and believe me, it's not as bad as you might think it is. It's worse. It really is. It's pretty horrendous. It was commission only, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, which means that, if you don't sell, you don't get paid, basically. And it was pretty horrendous. And I remember when I was going around, council estates and really sort of undesirable areas doing this, I thought to myself, I'm sure I could do something better than this because I couldn't do much worse. So at that point, I really started to think more seriously about what I wanted to do. Now, how did I do it? Well, basically, I'm going to talk through what I did and how what I did might be able to help you. And also, what happened to me is quite a good example of how flexible and how casual the media industry can be as a whole. Not always, but in a lot of areas it is. Now basically what happened was I was temping for an agency in Newcastle, and I got one of those jobs emails where they say this is what's going, and I signed up to this thing. And they often don't work properly with search engines. When you say I want jobs in Newcastle, they give you stuff in London or Jamaica or New York or wherever. They never seem to work, and I actually got a random email saying there was a job going to the BBC, 3-month contract. And it got me thinking. I thought, I'd quite like to work for the BBC, having no prior media experience at all, didn't know anyone who'd worked for them or was working for them or anything like that. And it was based in London and working in one of the offices, and I thought, well, maybe I could do it. Maybe I could give this a go. So I applied online on the BBC Careers website and got invited down for an interview, and basically had to get the overnight bus from Newcastle to London, which I really do not recommend. If you're travelling down there, it's very hard work. Got about 2 hours sleep, and I was pretty rough when I got there, and I was there at about 7 in the morning, and my interview was at 9. So it wasn't, the best prep, but that's what I did, and got through the first interview, and got told I've got a second interview, which is quite common with the BBC. Actually, they normally do 2 interviews for most jobs, even entry level. And got through that, and then I get a call about maybe 3 weeks later to say, okay, you didn't get the job that you went for, but there is another job going because somebody else has left in the same department. Again, it's just 3 months. Would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And it was more or less the same job, but just working for somebody else. And I accepted, put the phone down, thinking, oh wow, and then slowly it sinks in, hang on, I've just accepted a job 300 miles from where I live, I don't know anybody, I've never been there, never lived there, don't know anything. So you can imagine the sort of panic that followed. But everything came together, and I managed to find a place to live in London literally, I think, about 4 days before I was due to start. So again, it was pretty tight, but things did come together in the end. And I ended up doing that job for actually 4 months. They extended me for a month, but then the person who had left actually came back to her job and I had to go off and do something else. But the interesting thing was that at the BBC in particular, an awful lot of jobs are internal only, which means that if you're actually working there, you will see maybe 50 or 60% more than the people who are outside the organisation. So even if you're just temping there or doing something freelance or whatever, you can look at the internal jobs website and see an awful lot more, and opportunities just expand, and there's an awful lot more going. So that made a huge difference, and I moved around internally. I did a 12-month contract with BBC Worldwide, who are the commercial arm. They do all the sort of toys and games, if anyone's seen those, and all the things for Doctor Who and Top Gear and that sort of thing, DVDs. So they do an awful lot with that. And then moved into programme sales, where you're actually selling programmes that the British broadcasters have made to other channels around the world. And that was quite interesting, did that for a couple of years. And I then moved into digital media, which I've been working in for about 2 years now. And I've also been a development producer, which is someone who sort of helps people develop ideas that they're not quite sure about and make them into something that can actually become a broadcast programme, essentially. So that's basically what I've done. So I've worked in the commercial side, which I've talked about, which is really the business side, which is where contracts get drawn up and funding gets agreed, and you come together to make programmes and you sell rights and things. So you basically say, okay, if you give me 10% of the show's budget, your company can do toys and DVDs and games and all the commercial activity, and of course online rights, which are becoming much more important in the co-market. And if you want to get into that, then it really depends on where your skill set lies, because an awful lot of people, when they think about TV, they think, oh, it's just, you know, your camera guy, your sound guy, director, producer, actors if you have them, that sort of thing, and that's it. But no, there's a huge amount more roles in television. There's all sorts of things. Look at any TV channel. They will have admin staff who do all the paperwork. You have people who do something called compliance, which is where you check tapes to see what content might be objectionable at certain times, so swearing, nudity, that sort of thing. You've got broadcast engineers, who are people who work on all the machinery and the kit that broadcasters use, which is a huge amount. You have IT staff. You've got a huge amount more than just the creative people who come together and actually make the show. So in that sense, there is a lot more opportunity than what you might think. Because people often, when they think about TV, think, oh, it's just, you know, a few people making a programme, that's it. No, it's an awful lot more. Now, TV channels are businesses, so they do have distributors attached to them quite often. So the BBC have BBC Worldwide, ITV have a company called ITV Global who sell their programmes to other channels around the world. And that's really been my focus, and a key area at the minute is digital media, because as you know, blockbusters and HMV and all the physical media are slowly disappearing, and online is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's only going to grow, which is actually the area that I work in at the minute. Excuse my back while I just check that you've got the same stuff on the screen. Now, just a few questions, just to get some dialogue from you guys. True or false, would you say, I need to have media qualifications to get in because it's so competitive? So yes, no, false? Yep, absolutely not. I don't have them. I don't have any to my name, and I've worked for, you know, some of the biggest guys in the business, and I know a lot of people who have done all sorts of work and done media qualifications, so that is not a barrier at all. You know, the two girls were talking about acting just earlier on. There are plenty of actors who are very active in the industry who have not got, you know, a drama school to their name, who haven't gone to acting classes, that sort of thing. So there are a lot of other routes in that you can take. So that needn't hold anybody back. Another thing that everybody thinks, you have to know industry people to break in, because jobs are based on word of mouth. Would you say that's true or false?
Maybe to an extent.
Yeah.
Like the BBC internal vacancies.
I would say partly. It depends. Like production crews, for instance, the people who actually make the shows, there is no corporate structure there. Those are people that come together just for that show and then disband. So there isn't, you know, like the normal recruitment process that companies go through. So a lot of those types of jobs are based on word of mouth, because often when a TV show gets commissioned, you have to move really quickly. So rather than, you know, advertise and have, like, you know, 100 CVs come in the door. You just say, okay, who's available, who have I worked with before, is that person good? Okay, we'll use them. An awful lot of jobs are got that way, but certainly there are still plenty advertised, loads of websites you can use where I see plenty of things going, TV crews and everywhere else, the entry level, don't need prior qualifications, blah, blah, blah. So the honest answer is that does happen, but having said that, it happens everywhere. It's certainly not just a media thing, that happens in construction, it happens in, teaching, everywhere else. People get jobs because they know somebody and you're a known quantity, essentially. You have to do unpaid internships to get anywhere, and they're slave labour. They just take the mick. Do you think that's true or false? What do you think?
False.
False? Yeah. There are internships. Many are unpaid, or low paid, or certainly don't pay very much money, but they're not mandatory. You don't have to sign up for an internship and then you can work for a company. There's plenty of other ways in. Temping agencies, for instance, are the way a lot of people get into big companies or companies that just need someone, quick. So I'd say if it is your first job or it's the first thing you're doing, say after leaving uni, that is a realistic starting point, but you certainly don't have to go for an internship. There's absolutely no reason why you should start there. So you can do one if you want, but it's absolutely not, you have to do that straight away. And it's like acting or modelling or fashion design, which are notoriously difficult to get into. My careers advisor said it's so competitive, don't bother. So competitive, it's not worth trying. Do you think that's true or false?
It's always worth trying.
Well, I would say absolutely false, because the industry has a very high turnover, and there's an awful lot of people coming in and leaving at all sorts of different times for all sorts of different reasons. Childcare, want to do something else, they get bored. So, for instance, my careers advisor, when I was 15, before I did my GCSEs in high school, I just vaguely mentioned to her during a session that we were having that I maybe wanted to work in TV. And she was sort of, said some things that were, let's say, politely off-putting. And then in the book, where she'd been seeing everyone and had made some comments next to their names, I saw in big red ink, she wrote next to my name, "Not realistic, see again." Well, I don't imagine she's here today, but what I can say is, sorry love, I went for it, I did do it, and I'm still doing it, and I'm still enjoying it. So, there we go. So that was that. Now, just going back to internships and unpaid work and those sorts of, whatever the person saying it wants it to mean, it can mean many, many different things. Now, the thing is that we hear that word an awful lot, and I can give you plenty of examples of things that I've done that were a good opportunity on paper, but were not maybe so when I actually did find out what I was going to have to do and what was involved in them. Now, television, film, the media, all of it, it's all business. And just like there are other companies that exploit people or use people's labour, there are people who will just get a young, unexperienced person and just use them for every bit of labour they can, and that's all they're interested in, and pay them not very much. That does happen. It shouldn't, but it does. But it happens in every industry. That's not unique to media either. But what you've got to be constantly asking yourself is what I'm doing going to get me to where I want to go? It's the saying that dentists need to pull teeth. So what I mean by that is that if you want to be a director, for instance, then you need to be directing sometime, somehow. If you want to be a writer, you have to be actually writing. But you get an awful lot of people that seem to think, oh, well, if I go in and I work as a personal assistant and I just do that and I'm around and I can observe, and yeah, you can do that, absolutely, no reason why you can't. It's a routine and you can talk to people and network a bit and learn and get some skills, but you have to be actually doing the stuff that's going to get you to where you want to go, if that makes sense. So you really need to focus, and you have to focus on what you want to do. Like for instance, if you want to be an actor, should you be working as an extra? Something different. Do you think you should be working as an extra if you want to be an actor? Yeah? No? What do you think? It doesn't, but the fact is that extra work, you are not acting. You are there to add atmosphere to a scene, whatever it is. So basically, if there's, you know, like when they're in the Rovers in Coronation Street, all those people in the background who are actually not talking, if you watch carefully, they're not actually speaking, they're miming. They are all extras, and they are not acting. You're called a walk-on if you actually look at the contract. But if you want to be, if you're serious about it and you want to do acting, then you need to be, you know, rehearsing scripts, you need to be auditioning, you need to be developing characters, working with directors, and building that skill set, which is really the key word, skills. You need to be building those skills, whereas if you're an extra, you're not doing any of that, or on a very, very small sort of scale, like a bit of advice from the director about how you guys need to fit in with the scene or whatnot. So you can observe and you can learn, but you need to be focusing on what you really, really want to do. That's the most important thing. So there's a saying, dentists need to pull teeth, focus on what you want to do and stick to it. So you can observe and shadow, but if you want to become proficient in something and you want to have a viable career at the end of it, then you need to be focusing on what you want to do. So that's the key thing. Very good example of that. A mate of mine called Rachel, that's not her, it's just a screen grab of a guy who's working as a production assistant, and that's lovely. I'm going to come on the side. A mate of mine called Rachel wanted to be a floor manager, someone that sort of runs a studio set. Kind of like a production manager, but a little bit different. And she got a job working for a very well-known big production company who've done some massive shows. And she was really excited, and she told me all about it and said, okay, they've said that I can do 1 month and it's low paid, sort of not an internship, but like a production assistant sort of job. And I can, you know, observe and look at the director, and I can get a bit of training, hopefully, that sort of thing. And I was like, well, yeah, great. And anyway, she was actually working on a cookery program. And I was talking to her about maybe 1 month later after she finished. And I said to her, well, how did it go? What happened? And she said to me, this was her response, this is not edited, they gave me crap jobs and forgot I was there. It was like supermarket sweep with pot washer thrown in. The sum total of what they had her doing was buying food and washing cookery utensils, and that was more or less it. So you can pretty much forget networking if the only people you're spending time with is the sink and the supermarket shelves. So this is a really good example of how, you know, it might be a good opportunity, but it might not get you to where you want to go. It might not be the best use of your time. So you really need to weigh up, is what I'm doing actually going to get me to where I want to go? But even, you know, the rubbish jobs I've done have served a purpose, because when you've done a really menial job you didn't like, you think, okay, well, I didn't like doing that, but I certainly know what I don't want to do. And it does make you appreciate a good job when you've got one, and make you really appreciate it when you actually get to what you really want to do. So you can learn from that, and I certainly appreciate the jobs I've had the past few years more because of some of the stuff I did earlier on in my career. So what you can learn from Rachel's gig is that it can be a great company, it can be fabulous on paper, but what is the role actually doing, and what are you doing that's going to get you in, well, to where you want to be in TV? What's kit or software you'll be trained on? Will lead to something else internally? Does the prestige or the calibre of the company outweigh the fact that, you know, you're just going to be greeting guests or that sort of thing? And also, a lot of people are spooked by talk because the media is, you know, a very chatty industry, for want of a better word. People are often a bit hesitant, and they think, oh, well, it's a very small industry, and you have to be, you know, best friends with everybody, and you have to not rock boat, and just hope you have to work hard enough to get yourself noticed. Well, what I can tell you from my experience is that there are lots and lots of wonderful people to work with. It can be very rewarding. There's some really great, energetic people with loads of great ideas, very clever, very intelligent, and very passionate about what they do. But like I was saying earlier, you also get cowboys who just try to get every bit of labour out of someone that they can, and you get no thanks or credit for it at the end. So that happens everywhere. So that, you know, can happen to anybody, and it's no one's person's fault. So do work hard, but what I like to add to that is work smart. And when I say work smart, it's just, again, asking yourself, is what I'm doing going to get me to where I want to go? So in closing, just before I open up to questions or whatever you guys want to talk about, I did it off my own back. I didn't have anyone opening doors for me, didn't have any contacts in the industry. It was no media degree either, so no academic qualification to speak of. don't let that put you off. It's not a closed business or a closed shop, and you know, people do it. The media industry is really casual and really flexible, but that also means there's a huge amount of freedom to move around, to do lots of different roles in quick succession, to try something, think, oh, I don't quite like that, but I can try something else. And you're often, you know, there's a huge amount of temporary contracts and short-term contracts, so you don't have to be locked in for, say, a year of something that you don't like doing just so you can get to where you do want to go. And also focus on what you do, or focus on what you want to do, and stick to it, because dentists need to pull teeth, as the saying goes. So, yeah, that's basically it. And since the subject is how to get into the media or how to get into TV, rather than preparing any sort of pre-rehearsed answers, I just wanted to answer whatever questions you guys want to ask, or talk about whatever you want to talk about, and yeah, whatever you guys want to know. So. About your questions.
What kind of work were you doing for the things like Disney and ESPN?
Well, ESPN are the sports channel owned by Disney, so really I should put them both the same. Yeah, basically was working in digital media, so there's a huge amount of activity in what's called video on demand, or in America they're kind of calling it TV everywhere, which is where you can watch things played back on, you know, like catch-up services on your phone or your iPad or online or that sort of thing. But the thing is that no one really knows where it's all going. You know, digital media is changing all the time as all the new devices come out and they get faster and slicker, and people's expectations get so much higher. You know, I mean, once upon a time, when the internet first started, we had to wait like half an hour to watch a video or something like that, whereas nobody's got the patience to do that now. So people's expectations are building and building all the time. So the industry is trying to move with that. Yeah, I was working in digital media to help develop opportunities there, and it was the commercial side. So you're working with clients to agree what programs are going to take on-demand services, getting the tapes to them, making sure the programs are clear, so you've got the right to sell them and there's no problems, and there's not been any complaints about the program or that sort of thing. So it was a lot of paperwork, a lot of admin, but also you got to see some really cool stuff, like all the new technology that's coming up, or that sort of thing. So yeah, that was the bulk of what I did with Disney. Cool.
So with that in mind, are there any particular either computer programs or computer suites which would be good to familiarise yourself with in order to, you know, prepare yourself or oneself for working with that?
Well, there are several that most companies use, but it depends what you want to do. Like, for instance, if you want to be an editor, the two biggest are Avid, which is the traditional editing software that most broadcasters use, or FCP, which is Final Cut Pro, the Mac one. And I know most TV channels, when they advertise, they like people who can do both, because that just means that you're quite multi-skilled. Whereas in terms of actual softwares, a lot of softwares that TV channels use, the big ones, like the BBC, have got all their own softwares that have been designed for them, and they've got a lot that are unique to them. There aren't really any industry standard ones, or there is one called Vision, which is a way of storing tape information and drawing up programs and lists of programs and that sort of thing. That one's very popular. I know BT use that, and quite a few other people do. I think ITV do as well. So that's certainly one to look at. But yeah, but certainly being good on IT is one of the best things you can have, really, and being good on Outlook, PowerPoint, that sort of thing. I'm okay, as you can see, not massively proficient, but yeah, so IT skills really, really good, because you'd be surprised, an awful lot of jobs in TV channels have a lot of computer time, desk time.
Sorry, is there anything really specifically as far as video on demand is concerned?
Well, like I was just saying, the technology is changing all the time, and no one really knows where it's going. I don't know where it's going, and industry experts don't know where it's going either. It goes where the market, you know, where the money is made, and people follow that, basically. Yeah, for digital media, it's mainly done through servers. It's all file-based delivery, what they call now, or tapeless delivery is really the sort of buzzword people use. So it used to be that if someone bought a program in, say, Spain, from England, you would send them a tape and you'd courier it and send the paperwork and stuff, whereas now you just get a file which can be very large, it can be 50, 100, 200 gigabytes, and you transfer it. It might take a long time, but you just bypass all of that, and that's how most delivery is done now for digital media, with the exception of Sky. Sky still take tapes, and then they ingest it all, which means they turn it from the tape into a digital file at their headquarters. Yeah.
Were you saying that you'll probably be looking at a lot of temporary jobs, contracts, and moving from one thing to another?
Yeah.
Generally, are there lots of periods where you don't actually have any work or related to what you want to do, where you're maybe just picking up temp work, admin, or waiting on tables, that sort of thing?
Well, certainly, I did some temp work when I was between jobs for an agency, and I did some event work, which was not very well paid, but you can get something very quick. And almost everybody I remember I was on with was either an actor or a writer or a singer or something like that. I think it's because those people do the sorts of jobs, they know that there will be periods like that, and they sort of plan for it, and they sign up with lots of agencies, and they can ring up. And the thing is, I mean, I live in London, and there's so many agencies in London that you literally can do temp work every single day of the week if you want to. There are that many agencies. So, although it's more expensive to live there, of course, so you have got that sort of trade-off. No, I've always been, I mean, you could say I've been lucky, for instance, I've never been out of work for a very long time. But I think the media have actually weathered the storm pretty well in the past few years. There's still a lot of growth in many areas, and there's still lots of new jobs coming up. So I found it more or less okay, but I suppose it just depends on how proactive you are. Like, certainly if you're the sort of person that, you know, just waits for the phone to ring and thinks, oh, well, I don't mind if I don't work for a while. I mean, yeah, it's quite hard to be successful if you have that sort of approach, because there's a lot of jobs that are very competitive, especially full-time ones, meaning permanent ones. And you will get lots of people applying, so you have to really demonstrate that you really want to work for them personally, or you really want to do that particular job, which is something I suppose you should illustrate for any job, but particularly so in the media where there's so many people that want to get into it. So yeah, I've not found it too tough, but then again, you know, I'm just one person, and there's, you know, plenty of other people who may think differently. Yeah. Any more for any more?
Which would you say is the most fun area of the media to go into? Digital media? Docs? Dramas?
Ooh, that's a tough one. When you say the most fun, I actually really liked being a development producer, although it is hard, where you are literally sort of either working alone, or you're working with a scriptwriter or a creative person to help literally develop a small idea into something that can make a program or a one-off documentary or a film or whatever. It was fun, and I really enjoyed it, and it's really great to see your ideas sort of take fruition. And when you're working with someone else, you can bounce ideas off each other, and you can also come up with things that they would never have thought of or you wouldn't have thought of. So it's quite a nice process. It's a bit like making music with someone, I suppose, all that sort of thing. So I really enjoyed doing that. That was fun. Although if you have a complete block and you've got no ideas about something, or it just doesn't get you going, then it is quite tough.
So is that working on a long-term project or a possible project?
That for me was actually working on a documentary, which was going to be covering a film. It was kind of like two projects in one. There was a film, and there was going to be a documentary about the film, and it was sort of working out, you know, how they could look and sound and shape, and you've got to think about so many different things. You've got to think about the sort of audience that you want to reach and who it might appeal to. Has anything else been done before it? Is this idea new and fresh and vibrant, and is it something that's going to capture people's imaginations, that sort of thing? So work in development, I think, is brilliant. I absolutely loved it, and that was great fun.
Would you say that once you're in, you're in? Like, into the media, you then use that to get to other places?
I think up to a point, maybe. I mean, certainly once you're in a big company like the BBC, for instance, then obviously it's a lot easier. Like I was saying at the beginning, there's a lot of jobs that are internal only, so you can only apply for them if you're already in the organisation and working there. So in that sense, it is easier. But I mean, because a lot of jobs, and quite a lot, certainly more than 50% of jobs are either fixed-term contracts or temporary contracts, it means that you've always got to be thinking about the next job. And I always say you should never stop thinking about the next job or how the next year is going to look or that sort of thing. So it's certainly not a closed shop. It's not impossible, but once you're in, it is easier because you know people and you can hear things that are going on the grapevine. And I went through a phase where I was sending out lots of speculative CVs, but then I sort of caught on to the fact that spec CVs, if people really want someone, then they're either going to be advertising or there's going to be word going round that they want someone. So it's a good way, if you really want to work for one person or one place really badly, of registering your interest and making them aware of you. But I have only really got an interview once off the back of a spec CV, and I sent out quite a lot. So it's a worthwhile thing to do if you want to work in a particular place, but I would say in general, your best bets are certainly the specific media agencies, which is quite a few. They're well established and they're very good. Lots of jobs are agency only, so they won't be advertised, so you've got to be with the agency in order to see or hear about the job. Or the specialist broadcast jobs websites, there's lots of different ones. And also Twitter and Facebook. All the independent production companies now have Facebook pages, and they have actually started catching on to the fact that there's enough people on their page that if they advertise a job, they can get someone without going to an agency and without paying a fee. There's one called the Unit List that is very popular, and I don't know if you've heard of that. You have, okay. And I know people who've got jobs through that. So that is becoming bigger and bigger, but as with digital media, no one knows where it's going. So it could end up, we all live in sort of online communities, and yeah, that's how business is done. So I hope that answered your question in a roundabout way. Any more? No? Okay. All right.
Lovely.
Well,
Thank you very much, Hunter.
you're very welcome.
Brilliant.
Cheers, thanks.
Very, very quick.